Hi, I'm Bukky Adebayo, and I'm the product manager for Waypoint. Waypoint is an application delivery tool that enables simple yet flexible DevOps workflow. In this talk, I will be talking about the past, the present, and the future of Waypoint. We'll be specifically talking about the problems that Waypoint solves, how we solve those problems, what we've shipped recently, and an early preview into our roadmap. First, I will talk about the problem that we solve. So HashiCorp historically has been focused on operators or platform builders who are building platforms for application developers. They're using our tools to abstract away the underlying infrastructure, and they're enjoying it. But they came to us and they asked, how should app developers interact with your tools? And the answer wasn't all your app developers should learn Terraform, Vault, and Consul. So we went to the drawing board and we looked at application developers. And we looked at what tools they were using. We noticed that there was a clear pattern with how to build applications. There are clear tools that they can use to write and test. But when you look at app delivery, it gets a little bit murkier. Operators are often setting up the infrastructure that app developers are using. And app developers are increasingly needing to understand how their application is provisioned, networked, secured, in order to deliver it and to maintain it. And there isn't a clear pattern on how to do that. They often have to learn the bespoke set of tooling that the operators are using. And that was creating a lot of friction. And so we started thinking, what would make a delightful DevOps workflow? We realized that there were 3 components to that. 1, developer experience, 2, operator experience, and 3, an extensible set of integrations. We noticed that the most successful enterprises were investing a ton of money and time and expertise into developing a DevOps workflow. And some people were successful in seeing increased developer productivity and happiness, but most got maybe 1 or 2 correct. And they were expecting, that Heroku, delightful, loving experience, and they were getting what is essentially an Excel spreadsheet or a form that maybe a developer might use, or they wouldn't touch at all. So we decided that we could make it easier. We could lower the bar for how to build your own DevOps workflow. And so we landed on Waypoint as an application delivery tool for simple and flexible DevOps workflow. We could bring the benefits of a simple DevOps workflow to the smallest of teams and also expand and be flexible enough for the most complex enterprise to use. So what are the key features of Waypoint? You'll likely recognize this from Terraform. But the first key component is app delivery as code, which is a strategy for capturing the complexity of application delivery by borrowing tools and practices from software development. You can define how your application is built, deployed, and released in a simple waypoint.hcl file that lives in the same repo as your source code, and thus provides an easy way for developers and op teams to have a shared view on how the application is delivered. The waypoint.hcl file has several components, including the build stanza, the deploy stanza, and the release stanza, as well as a set of configurations you can make on your application. In this talk specifically, I will focus on the build, deploy, and release stanzas. So the build stanza defines how your app will be built. Waypoint supports a few built-in plugins to help you manage how to build your Docker image for your app. Similarly, you have the deploy stanza, which takes a previously built artifact and stages it onto a targetable deployment platform. The targetable deployment platform is pluggable and can be Docker, Kubernetes, Nomad, AWS, EC2, and numerous others. And like with all of our other products, our ecosystem is growing. Finally, the release activates a previously staged deployment and opens it to general traffic. This step may involve a deployment to a load balancer, updating DNS, and configuring a service mesh. The second component is an easy-to-use developer experience. And we wanted the developer experience of delivering an application to be as easy as a waypoint up. And with a waypoint up, you can easily build, deploy, and release your application. We know that delivering your application is only the beginning of managing it. And so we wanted it to be an easy way to debug things when things go wrong. So we incorporated logs into the CLI commands and UI so developers can easily answer the question of, is my Kubernetes pod running, and trace what issues may be occurring with their application. Other tools give developers the ability to answer the question of what happened in the past. Waypoint helps them answer what's happening right now so that they can debug any issues that are ongoing. And finally, we wanted an easy but extensible operator experience. For developers who are setting up Waypoint for their small team, we wanted to allow them to easily set up any application delivery on any deployment platform. And so we integrate with a growing number of deployment platforms and ecosystems. So what have we shipped? Since we launched, we shipped Workspaces, GitOps workflow, and support for a broader ecosystem. But I'll start with Workspaces. When we talk to developers, they talk to us about how they're not just releasing to production. They're often shipping to dev or staging or integration before shipping to production. And they needed a way for us to be able to, for them to be able to define that within the waypoint.hcl file. And that is how Workspaces was born. And so with Workspaces, you can waypoint up to any environment by simply adding your workspace name tag to that command. Secondly, we wanted to really focus on integrating into the developer workflow. So we introduced Git polling. And with Git polling, it allows developers to trigger a build with any changes to a specific branch on a repo. And so we have that smooth and nice Git integration. And finally, we wanted to add more of the common deployment platform. So we added Kubernetes, Lambda, Google Cloud Run, and Azure Container Instance as pluggable deployment platforms for Waypoint. And now I'm excited to talk about the next milestone for Waypoint, HCP Waypoint. Today, we are releasing HCP Waypoint into private beta. When we talked to customers about using Waypoint, they talked to us about how difficult it was to run and maintain a Waypoint server. That doing that securely and reliably was a big challenge for their organization to adopt Waypoint. And so we decided to move the server part of Waypoint into the cloud. So you'll get all of the benefits I've already outlined without all of the sort of work of maintaining a Waypoint server. The HashiCorp platform will just take care of that for you. All you have to do is write your waypoint.hcl file, connect your runner to your deployment infrastructure, and specify your Git repo, and HCP Waypoint will help you deploy your application. And we can leverage other tooling and workflows since when HCP Waypoint is on cloud. The first is improving our GitOps workflow. We're also going to have the GitOps app integration that allows an organization to sort of connect HCP Waypoint to their GitHub org, and therefore all of their repos from their GitHub org will be within Waypoint, and you can easily deploy using Waypoint. And finally, to maintain data security and reliability with a cloud service, we wanted to keep sort of the runner model, so you would have the runner performing the build, release, deploy jobs, as well as the GitOps workflow jobs. But we didn't want that to be yet another barrier of entry. So we made installing a Waypoint runner as easy as Waypoint runner install. And with that, you can install your runner and save the list of runners that you have installed. If you think HCP Waypoint will be useful for you and your organization, visit waypointproject.io to apply for HCP Waypoint private beta. Next, I want to look forward and talk about a couple of features we're working on and thinking about over the next few months. First, when we talk to customers about Waypoint, they often say, yeah, build, deploy, and release are great lifecycle events to anchor our app delivery. But we do other things. We do container scanning, we do tests, QAs. And so we decided to introduce custom pipelines as a way for customers to define custom steps within their HCP Waypoint or compose a pipeline of steps within their HCP Waypoint. And so you can define a step that's a sneak scan, or you can say, oh, actually, I'd like to build and deploy within my dev environment and then my staging environment as part of my releasing to prod and do some tests along the way. And next, when we talk to platform builders, they say the Waypoint.htl is fairly simple, but we don't want app developers to be writing these files from scratch. We want to be able to give them guardrails and organizational context to help them. And so we're going to be working on an operator consumer paradigm that allows platform engineers to define, this is what an HCL file for deploying onto Kubernetes looks like for us. And then folks are able to use, application developers are able to use that to define how their application is going to be deployed on Kubernetes or Nomad or whatever the deployment infrastructure is. And finally, as part of the product development process, we are constantly making improvements and building the app and making UI, CLI improvements based on feedback that we hear from customers. More broadly than these specific features, we'll continue to make incremental changes to our CLI and UI based on feedback from our customers. And to help us with that, I have a couple of asks. Like I mentioned earlier, you can sign up to apply for our HCP Waypoint private beta at waypointproject.io. By participating in the private beta program, you'll be able to give us early feedback on our roadmap as well as get early access to HCP Waypoint. And as with all of our other products, you can always try out the open source version and give us feedback on our GitHub repo with issues in the Discuss forum. And finally, thank you for joining HashiCorp HashiConf EU.